Hello, welcome to Seafood. My name is Chris, and this is my first episode here on the channel. Today we're going to say hello to the concept of what we're doing here, and we're going to go over a Hello World program written in C. So let's start off by talking about KnR because that's where we're going to be. That's our resource we're going to be using is the C programming language by Brian Kernighan and Dennis Ritchie. This is a text that a lot of people get introduced to when it comes to C. It's an older text. It's been around for a while. I think the original printing was in 1978 or 79, so that's over 40 years ago. The second edition was upgraded, was an updated version, but it was updated in 1989, so we're still looking at a 30-year-old programming textbook, which there's not a lot of 30-year-old programming textbooks that are still valid, and whereas this one definitely has a few older conventions in it that we're going to examine here in this channel. For the most part, it's a fantastic resource for learning the C programming language. It's got a lot of examples and a lot of exercises, and the exercises utilize the contents in the examples, which you can't always say about some other programming books that have come out since, some more modern programming books or what have you. So what is KnR? I mentioned it. It's the second edition of the book. And the second edition is often referred to as ANSI-C. ANSI being some sort of an organization that standardizes things. So we're going to be using this text as our resource for learning C. And what else are we going to do? We'll be looking at the tools that we're going to be using here. I am using Fedora Linux. You can use whatever system you like, especially if you're going to go with Linux, it can be any Linux distros. Donny Osmond says any distro will do. So on top of Fedora Linux, let's just see here, what do we got here? This is my computer I'm working with. So this is Fedora 33. This is 2021 in January. That's all the stuff you need there. We're also going to be using GCC to compile our programs. And at the time of this, my version of GCC is 10.2. One of the reasons why I like using Fedora is it is a lot of the newest versions of things like GCC and Clang and CMake and what have you. But doesn't matter. As I said, any other Linux distro is fantastic. And then lastly, and this is not necessarily a C tool, but I myself like using Vim for my text editing. You obviously use whatever you like. It's up to you what you're most comfortable with. So let's move along and take a look at our project here. Let me clear this and see what we're looking at here. This is episode 1. We're looking at the Hello C. So I've got the textbook version of a Hello World program here, and we're going to open it. And there we go. This is the KnR Hello World program. It's one of the first things you see in the C programming language book. And this is a common thing. We write Hello World programs for to help us learn a new language. And really, one of the biggest hurdles here is going to be compiling this thing. So let's use our GCC compiler to compile this simple Hello World program. I'm in the wrong directory here. So we're going to go there, and let's GCC. And we're going to compile this as is, but I'm just going to give it an output file as our hello executable. And there we go. The O flag tells GCC what we want our output file to be called. Otherwise, it'll just be called a.out, which is not a big deal either. And we see here that we have a warning right off the bat. And it's kind of weird that we have such a small program, but our compiler is giving us guff about it. And one of the reasons for this is that this Hello World, this example from the textbook, actually uses some older conventions that were popular with C a while ago, and then some modern conventions are probably preferred to that. If I go ahead and compile this using the version of the standard compiler, so that would be you can access it with the ANSI flag for your GCC. If we go GCC ANSI and let's call it hello, and we are going to do our hello C, I can compile without any warnings because the original ANSI C version that this book is based off of, this is completely acceptable, a completely acceptable program written in that style. But let's go back to our more modern version and we get that warning. It tells us that our return type defaults to int, and this is a problem. What it's complaining about here is that in this hello C, our main function, which is all programs have a main function, our main function is declared kind of loosely. We say that it's a main function, doesn't take any arguments, and does whatever. And in old C, this would automatically just say, okay, we didn't explicitly state the return type. We're just going to assume int. It's an implicit int return. And in newer programs, we want to explicitly state that main is going to return an int. So this is our function signature here. And if I just leave it at that, I can compile this now using our modern compiler, and we got rid of that warning. Notice that we got rid of the warning without actually returning an int from main. We just said that we would, and then we didn't, and the compiler is just fine with that. That's because if you get to the bottom of main is a special program. If we get to the bottom of main and we haven't returned anything, the system just returns 0 for us. But we're going to return 0 explicitly. This is a habit that I want to get into, and I want to encourage. If you say you're going to return an int, don't rely on the implicit return, just return an int yourself. And in later episodes, we'll see how we can be even more explicit about what we return. But in this case, to signal success, we are going to return 0. And again, this thing's going to run. And actually, I haven't run the program yet, so let's do that now. Hello world. That's kind of drab. Let's get a little bit more excited about this. Let's change that to a capital. And let's have an exclamation mark there. That's a little bit more exciting. Now we're excited about learning C. There we go. Hello world. Fantastic. I want to take a look at, and if I remember correctly, let's just check out the notes. We did update it. We're going to look at the environment that our program operates in, because our hello world that we ran over here in my right window, hello ran in this terminal, and it ran in the environment of my my Linux installation. And our programs actually communicate with the environment, and there's certainly a lot you can go back and forth between the system and your program. And you can do that in much more fancier programs. But here, the way that we communicate with the outside world is we return that 0. So if I go back here and we take a look, we return that 0. And I can access that value by echoing an environment variable, which is indicated by the by the question mark. And that is 0. We can examine and see what the last program returned. And if I change this, to a 1, which in a C program, when you return 1 from main, that indicates that there was some sort of an error. Well, that gets communicated to our environment. Oh, I need to compile and run this thing. And there's our hello world. And if I echo this again, there we go. We see the 1, which is an indication to our environment that there was a problem with this program. It terminated as an error. And in fact, if I run it again, you'll see that it changes. That's because echo is its own little program. So we're echoing this environment variable from our hello world program. We see that it terminated with an error, but that echo itself terminated with a success. So that's just an interesting interaction between your programs and the Linux environment. So I'm going to change this back to a 0, and that's good. One of the last things I want to do here, and I did not mention this in my notes, of course, is I want to show you how we're going to be examining the language as we're learning it. And one of the things we're going to take a peek at here is our printf statement. I've never really liked printf being used in Hello World programs with C because printf is more of a magical beast than what we're using it for here. So in my, I'm going to clear the screen, and we are going to take a look at the manual entry for printf. And oh, you know what? And I think we're going to look at we have to be explicit and say we want the man3 page. So this is your Linux Programmer's Manual, which is built into all your Linux environments. It's a wonderful tool to use and check often. And we see that printf is a function that takes a string and it's going to print it. But it also, we have a dot, dot, dot here. This function is used to format output, and it's actually pretty fancy, and we're not using it at all here. We're just really printing a string. So the tool that I'd prefer to use for this is puts. And I'm not sure why we don't see puts get used quite a bit. Puts, it writes a string S and a trailing new line to stood out, and that's it. So let's change this. We're going to write puts, and we are going to go to the... We're going to get rid of the N. Oh. I'm a Vim user, but I'm not a black belt Vim user. I'm not a Vimja. Anyways, here we've changed our call to puts, which is just going to put this string on our output, and that's what we're going to use. And this was just more about me showing you that your man pages are quite useful. In this case, we looked up puts, and we were able to see what it does for us, and it's built into your Linux environment, so you might as well use it. So that works. So let's recompile this. We're going to call it hello again, and we're going to compile our hello.c, and let's run hello.c. There you go. Works just fine. So puts does its job. It puts the string on your command line, and that is our hello world in C. That's about it for today's episode. Was there anything else in the notes? Oh yes, additional resources. I like using Linux because I'm very comfortable with Linux. If you yourself would like to better learn the Linux environment, because we're going to be making use of pipes and redirection operators and other Linux tools throughout the course of these videos, a great book that I've used myself is the Linux Command Line 2nd edition. Oh, this is, I should, by William Schatz, I believe, 2 T's is his name. And this was a great book that really helped me to work with the command line when learning Linux. So highly recommend that, as well as the C programming language. But that's about all I got for today. So I hope you have a good one, and I hope you learned something here today. Next time we're going to be taking a look at some basic I/O a little bit later in the chapter 1 of the C programming language. So have a good day.